establishment of federation constitution of provinces. Principal state system is the act divided the powers between the central units in terms of list federalist provincial residuary. You know, 47. And distinguishes between the commercial and political functions of the company. It allowed the court of directors to manage the commercial affairs but create a new body called board of directors. bpsc 1784. It empowered the board of control to supervise and direct all operations, the civil, COD and board of directors. Act established dual government in England. Act of 1786 to invest more power in Governor General. 1786 Lord Cornwallis was appointed as the Governor General of Bengal. He pledged to remain to accept the Charter Act 1793, also called EIC Act. Governor General more powers and control over the governments of the subordinate presidencies of Bombay and Madras. It extended trade monopoly of the company in India for another 20 years. It provided that the commander-in-chief was not to be a member of Governor General's Council unless he was so appointed. It laid down that the members of the Board of Control and the staff were henceforth to be paid out of Indian revenues. It abolished the trade monopoly of the company in India. However, it continued the monopoly of the company over trade India with tea and trade with China. It allowed the Christian missionaries to come to India for the purpose of enlightening the people. Chartered Act 1830. It provided for the spread of Western education among the inhabitants of the British territories in India. It authorized the local governments in India to impose tax on persons. They could not punish the persons for not paying taxes. Chartered 1833. It made the Governor General of Bengal as the Governor General of India and vested to him all civil and military powers. For the first time, Government of India was used. Deprived the power of Bombay and Madras of to the legislative powers, ended the activities of East India Company's commercial body. The Charter Act of 1833 attempted and introduced to open civil servants. 1853 this act called Select Committee. 1852 Select Committee से लिया था. It is separated from the first legislative council provided for the addition of 6 new members called Legislative Council to the council. It introduced the open company of civil servants. It introduced the first time local representation in India out of 6 members. The significant act was enacted in the wake of the revolt of 1857, also known as the First War of Independence of the Sikh community. The act known as the Act for the Good Government of India abolished the East India Company and transferred the powers of the government territories and revenues to the British Crown. The features of this act were Governor General became Viceroy of India. Lord Canning was the first Viceroy of India. It ended the system of double government, abolition the Board of Control and Court of Directors, created a new secretary. Celebration research gradually powers to the movement Madras started from the Regulating Act of 1773 describing and the Charter Act of 1833. It also provided for the establishment of new legislative body for Bengal, Northwestern Province and Punjab, established in 1862. Bengal, 1861. Portfolio, introduced by Lord Canning. Miniature cabinet decentralization. It empowered the viceroy to issue the ordinances. Under Council Act 1892, it features 10 to 16 members. To increase the functions of Legislative Council and give them the power of discussing the budget. 1892 budget. Non-official members of the Central Legislative Council. This act amended limited in that provision for the use of election and the filling up of the non-official seats both in the word elections, however, not used in this act. 1892. Indian Council of 1909. This act amended limited in that provision for the use of election and the filling up some of the non-official seats both in the central and legislative. Indian Council of 1909. This act is also known as Morley Minto reforms. Lord Morley was then Secretary of State of India and Lord Minto was the Viceroy of India. The features of the act were as follows. It considerably increased the size of Legislative Council. It ranged from 60 to 70. The members in the Provincial Legislative Council were not uniform. It retained official majority in the Central Legislative. Members were allowed to ask supplementary questions and move on resolutions. Satyendra Prasad Sinha became the first Indian to join the Viceroy Executive Council. He was appointed as the law member. It introduced a system of communal representation of Muslims by separate electorates. Father of communal electorate, Lord Minto. It also provided for a separate representation of Presidency Corporate of the Commerce and University and Jamindars. Government of India Act 1919. On August 20, 1917, the British government declared for the first time that its objective was the gradual introduction of responsible government in India. The Government of India Act of 1919 was enacted, which came to the force. This act is also known as Montagu's Chelmsford Reforms. Montagu's Secretary of the State for and Lord Chelmsford was the Viceroy of India. It further divided the provincial subjects into two parts transferred transfers and reserved. It introduced for the first time bicameralism and that elections in the Indian Legislative Council was replaced by bicameral legislative consisting of upper council, council of state and lower council legislative assembly. This majority was members of both houses were chosen by direct election. It required that the three of six members of viceroy executive councils other than the commander of chief were to be Indian. It extended the principle of communal representation by providing separate electorates for six Indian, Christians, Anglo-Indians and Europeans. It granted franchise to a limited number of people on the basis of property, tax and education, created a new office of the High Commissioner for India in London and transferred, provided for the UPSC and CPSC. It separated for the first time provincial budget from the central budgets. Simon Commission in November 1927. British government announced the appointment of 7 member Security Commission. The agreement known as Pune Pact retreated the Hindu joint electorate and gave reserved 2 seats to the depressed class. And Pune, Yarwada Jail, Nehru Report. Government of India Act 1935. It provided for the establishment of All India Federation constitutions of the provinces and peninsular states units. The act divided the powers between the federal list and provincial list. Concurrent list is 1935. It was directed provincial introduced provincial autonomy in the place provided for the hierarchy at the center. It introduced bicameralism in 6 out of 11 provinces. It abolished the Council of India established by the Government of India Act 1958. RBI provided for the civilians of RBI 1935. Provided for the Supreme Court 1935. Indian Independence Act of 1947. February 20, 1947. The British Prime Minister Clement declared that the British rule in India would end June 13, 1948. 1940 August of a law leading to law. Jan Parishad and Vidhan Sabha formed in 1935. 1947 3 June 1947 Pak and India Red Cliff Line divided. The features of this act were as follows. Partition of India to independent dominants India and Pakistan. Abolish the overseas for Constituent Assembly. Abolish the full office of the Secretary of the State of India. Granted freedom for the Indian peninsular states either to join the Dominion of India or Dominion of Pakistan. Deprived the British monarch of his right to veto bills or ask for reservations. Dropped the title of Emperor of India. It discontinued appointment to civil services. Making of the Constitution. 1934. The ideas of Constituent Assembly put by Emmanuel. 1935. INC officer demanded. 1938. Jawaharlal Nehru on behalf declared the Constitution of India must be framed. It was British government in what are known as August over 1940. 1942, Sir Stafford Cripps, a member of the cabinet, came to India with the draft proposal of the British government on the forming of independent constitution to be adopted of the World War II. Oh. The Constituent Assembly held the first meeting on December 9, 1946. The Muslim League boycotted a meeting and insisted on separate Kashmir to Pakistan. The meeting was thus attended by only 211 members. Dr. Sachinanda Sinha, Objectives on 13 December 1946, Jawaharlal Nehru moved the historic objective resolution. Constituent Assembly second 11 December 1946, Chairman Rajendra Prasad, Vice President. The first of performed ratified the India's membership of the National Flag. Committee, Union Power Committee, Jawaharlal Nehru, Union Constitution Committee, Jawaharlal Nehru, Provincial Provincial Committee, Sardar Patel, Drafting Committee, B.R. Ambedkar, Advisory Committee, Sardar Patel, Fundam. Drafting Committee set on August 29 and 47. It was committee that was entrusted with the task of preparing a draft of the new constitution, constituted of 7 members: Dr. B.M. Ambedkar, Gopal Swami Iyer, Nagar Allavadi, Krishna Iyer, K.M. Munshi, Sayyid Abdullah. Enactment of the Constitution. B. Ambedkar introduced the final draft of the Constitution in the Assembly on November 4, 1948, first reading. The Assembly had a general discussion on it for 5 days. Second reading, November 20. It ended in October 1946. The Constitution had adopted on November 26, 1914, contained a preamble, 395 articles, 8 schedules. Remaining provisions it came into the force. Constitution given of 26 January 1950. As important facts, Elephant was adopted as the seal of the Constituent Assembly. As B.N. Rao was appointed as the constitutional advisor. H.B.R. Lig Ayanagar was the secretary of the Constituent Assembly. S.N. Mukherjee was the chief draftsman of the Constitution in the Constituent Assembly. Prem Bihari Narayan Rasta was the calligrapher of the Indian Constitution. The original Constitution was handwritten by him in a falling italic style. The original version was beautified and decorated by artists from Santiniketan. Pictures were taken from the Nandalal Bose and Bihar Ramanar Sinha. Calligraphy of printing version and original constitution was done by the Vasant Krisadi and elegantly decorated and illuminated by Nandalal Bose. 42nd Amendment Act is also known as mini constitution due to the important and large number of changes made by the salient features of the constitution. Lengthy as written constitution was classified into written like the American Constitution or written British Constitution. Originally constitution divided into 395 articles, divided into 22 parts and 8 schedules. In the 2008 constitution preamble about 470 articles divided into 25 parts and 12 schedules. Resources. Mm. The structural part of the constitution is to a large extent derived from the Government of India Act 1935. The philosophical part of the constitution, the fundamental rights and the DPSP, derive the inspiration from the American Irish Constitution. The political part of the constitution of cabinet government and the relationship between the executive and the legislature have been largely drawn from the British Constitution. Fundamental rights. Right to equality, Article 14 to 18. Right to equality, right to freedom, right against exploitation, right to freedom of religion, cultural and educational rights, rights to constitutional remedies, Article 32. Equality, freedom, 14 to 18, 19, Article 23, 25, right to constitutional remedies, 32. They can also be suspended during operation except the articles granted by 20 and 21. According to B.R. Ambedkar, the DPSP is the feature of Indian Constitution. They are enumerated in the part of the Constitution. DPSP is meant for promoting the ideal of social and economic democracy. They seek to stabilize the welfare state in India. However, unlike the fundamental and the directives are non-justiciable in nature, they are not enforceable by the courts for their violation. In the original Constitution did not provide for the fundamental duties of the citizen. They were these were during the operation of internal emergency by the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act of 1976 on the recommendation of Sovereign Singh Committee. The 86th Constitutional Amendment Act of 2002 added one more fundamental duty taken from us USSR. Part 40 of the Constitution, which consists of only one Article 51A, especially 11 fundamental duties. The term secular was added to the preamble of the Indian Constitution by the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act of 1976. The preamble secures to all citizens of India liberty of belief, faith and worship. The state shall not discriminate against any citizen on the ground of religion, Article 15. Equality of opportunity for all citizens in matters and Article 16. All have the right to conserve protesting language, script or culture. All minorities shall have the right to establish and administer educational institution of the choice, Article 30. Universal adult franchise. Every citizen who is not less than 80 have the right to vote without any literacy. 61 Constitutional Amendment Act of 1988, Universal Adult Franchise, single citizenship, though the Indian citizenship is dual polity in India. Sixth, first schedule, name of the states and the jurisdiction. Second schedule, President of India, Governor of States, Speaker and Deputy Speaker of the Lok Sabha, Chairman and Deputy Chairman of the Rajya Sabha, the judges of the Supreme Court, the judges of the High Court, the CAG. Third schedule, forms of force of affirmation, the Union Minister, the candidates for election to the Parliament, the members of Parliament, the judges of the Supreme Court, the the CAG of India, the state ministers, the candidates, the judges of High Court. Fourth schedule, allocation of seats in Rajya Sabha. Fifth schedule, provision related to the administration and control of scheduled areas and scheduled tribes. Sixth schedule. Seventh schedule, date list, concurrent list. Eighth schedule, 14 languages, but presently there are 22 languages. Assamese, Bengali, Bodo, Dogri, Gujarati, Hindi, Kannada, Kashmiri, Konkani, Maithili. Sindhi was added by 21st Amendment Act 1967. Konkani, Manipuri, Nepali 71. Bodo, Dongri, Maithili, Santali 92nd Amendment Act 2003. Or Oriya was the 96th Amendment Act. 9th Schedule Act and Regulation. 10th Anti-Defection Law. This schedule was added by the 52nd Amendment Act 1985. 11th Schedule specifies the of Power Authority of Panchayats to foresee G 29 matters 12 schedule municipalities 74 Amendment 1992. Government of India Act 1935. Federal Scheme Office of Governor Judice UPSC Emergency Provision British Constitution Parliamentary Government Rule of Law Legislative Procedure Cabinet System Parliamentary Privileges Bicameralism US Constitution Fundamental Rights Removal of Supreme Court Impeachment of the President Vice President Irish Constitution DPSP Members of the Rajya Sabha nomination Canadian Govern Federation Strongs and the Governors Australian Constitution concurrently freedom of trade and commerce and intercourse. USSR fundamental duties, ideal of justice, social, economic, and political in the preamble. French Constitution, liberty, equality, and fraternity. South African Constitution, procedure for amendment of the Constitution and election of members of Rajya Sabha. Japanese Constitution. The American Constitution was the first to begin with a preamble. Many countries, including, followed this practice. The term preamble refers to the introduction of refers to the Constitution. The preamble to the Indian Constitution based on objective resolution put, put drafted and moved for the Pandit Nehru. It has been amended by the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act. Socialist, secular in integrity. The Indian brand of socialism is a democratic socialism, also state socialism, which involves the fundamental rights. The fundamental rights are Part 3 of the Constitution, Article 12 to 35, Part 3, derived from the Constitution of USA. Part 3 of the Constitution, also called described Magna Carta of India. The fundamental rights are named so because they are guaranteed protect over right to equality, Article 14, right to freedom, Article 19 to 22, right against exploitation, Article 23 to 24, right to freedom of religion, E, E, F, E, R, constitutional amendments are right to equality, right to freedom, right against exploitation, right to freedom of religion, culture and education rights, right to property, Article 31. Article 31 is removed of 44 Amendment Act 1978. It is made a legal right under Article 300A, Part 12 of the Constitution. Individual liberty and social control. Some of them are negative in nature, they defined and granted by the Supreme Court. Article 31 is saving of laws providing for 21B validation of certain acts and regulations. The term status is in Article 12. Laws is consistent with the fundamental rights. Article 13 declares that all laws are that are inconsistent without derogation of any of the fundamental rights shall be void. Right to equality. Right to equality. Article 1418. Equality before law and protection of law. Article 14. Provision of discrimination on grounds of religion, race, caste. Article 15. Equality in opportunities in matters of public employment. Article 16. Untouchability. Article 17. Evolution of titles. Protection of six rights regarding freedom. Right to freedom. Article 19. 1922. Protection, respect of conviction of offense. Protection to elementary education. Article 21A. Life and personal liberty. Article 21. Protection against arrest and detention in certain cases. Article 22. Additional 86th Constitutional Amendment Act 2002. Right against exploitation. Articles 23 to 24. Provision of traffic in human beings and forced labor. Article 23. Provision of employment of children factors. Article 24. Freedom to right of religion. Article 25. Community right. Freedom of conscience and free professional practice and propagation of religion. Article 25. Freedom of payment of taxes from promotion of religion. Article 27. Culture and education rights. Article 29, 30. Protection of language, script and culture of minorities. Article 29. Right of minorities to establish and administer education institution. Article 30. Right to constitutional remedies. Article 32. Right to move the Supreme Court, habeas corpus, mandamus, prohibition, certiorari, quo warranto. Mm, it's only Article 15. Article 15 should provide ये तो हो गया, कहाँ गया? Protection of six rights: freedom of speech and expression, right to assemble peacefully and without arms, right to move freely throughout the territory of India, right to reside and settle in any part of territory of India. National awards were instituted in the Government Party. This is purpose ये सब कहाँ है? Protection of the four types of right: habeas corpus, mandamus, provisions, territory, covenanto. Habeas corpus, it is a Latin word which is literally means to have the body of. It is an order issued by the court to a person who is detained another person to produce the body of the latter before it. The court then examines the cause and legality of detention. The right of habeas corpus can be issued against both public authorities as well as private authorities. The right detention, the proceeding is for attempt mandamus. It literally means we command. It is a command issued by the court to a public official asking him to perform his official duty that he has failed or refused to perform. The right of mandamus can be issued by against a private individual or body when the duty is discretionary or mandatory, against the President of India or state government, and against the Chief Justice of a High Court acting in a judicial capacity. Prohibition means to forbid. It is issued by a higher court to a lower court. So it is a literal sense. It means to be certified of, to be informed. It is issued by higher court to a lower court tribunal either. Cobrento. It means fake notice by authority issued by the court to inquire into legality of claim of person to a public office and it prevents illegal usurpation of public office by a person. Martial Martial Article 34 provides the restrictions while restriction of fundamental rights and while martial law is used in any area. Concept of martial law in known English means military rule. Local decision. Martial. Definition of state. Yeah, Article 14 equality before law. 15 prohibition of discrimination on grounds of religion, race, caste. 16 opportunity in public employment. Abolition of untouchability. Abolition of titles. Protections of certain rights regarding freedom of speech, etc. 21 right to education. 22 protection against detention in certain cases. 21 protection of life and personal liberty. 23 prohibition of trafficking in human beings and forced labor. bpsc. Didactic principle of state policy. The DPSC is in Part 4 of the Constitution, Article 36 to 51. It is Constitution 1937 and copied from Spanish Constitution. Bhimrao Ambedkar described this principle and noble features of the Indian Constitution. Features of the DPSP. very comprehensive economic, social, political program, non-justiciable and non-enforceable in nature. Classification promote village organized village panchayats and Indore. Article 40 cottage industry and cooperation. Article 43 43b